the fearless leader of the Steam Auto Club of America right here. Tell us about Mike Brown's engine.
This is a Mike Brown engine. It's nominally 20 horsepower. It's really detuned. It's large enough, double-acting piston valve. It's large enough to put out like 75 horsepower.
Oh, yeah.
But Mike Brown specified that it be able to run for 10,000 hours. And in consequence, it is very over-designed and detuned. It's designed to run at relatively low pressure, 200 psi, and relatively low stress, because Mike wanted it to last a long time.
10,000 hours.
And so that is what it's designed to do, and it has needle bearings and roller bearings throughout. It is double acting. The crossheads are right here, and it is double acting, which means you are not getting water in the oil, which happens when you convert a regular automobile engine or Briggs & Stratton to steam. You have a packing up here that keeps the water and steam from getting down through into the oil. So it's quite well lubricated. Because it's piston valve, which is much better than a D valve or a slide valve, you need to have an oil injector and inject a little oil in just before this piston valve, which is the other name for the piston valve is a spool valve. And it is exactly the same shape and works exactly the same way that hydraulic valves work. And it's shaped like a spool on a sewing machine, which is why it's called that. And a spool valve lasts a lot longer than a slide valve, but it's not necessarily the most efficient. And the reason is that your cold steam is going out through the same passages that your hot steam comes in, so it cools the hot steam. So you have some efficiency issues, but it's good enough. Now,
Can you estimate? I mean, percentage efficiency from the fuel content to the actual mechanical power out?
No, not really. I would assume on this 10%. The locomotives.
10%?
The locomotives were 6%.
6%?
But then they had to produce a lot of power in a small space, burning cheap coal, so they didn't care.
So you think this is higher than that, about 10% or so?
It
Has to be. Has to be.
Definitely higher than a locomotive.
Yeah.
But this is a single acting, so it is, double acting.
Double acting.
But it is a simple, so it is not a compound.
Yeah.
You'll get a little more efficiency if it were a compound, but it's good enough for a starter. It works. That's all that matters is it works. It's a V2, so it's self-starting, which is what you need. It's a good enough engine, but it's not the ultimate. It's not a modern engine. It's a 150-year-old design.
This is about $10,000 or so, 6,000 or so.
Mike's charging $6,500.
$6,500.
And the problem is that he advertises it as a steam engine, but it is not a steam engine until you have a water pump, a big fire, a heat exchanger for a boiler, an oil pump to inject oil into the thing so that you don't scratch everything up when it runs, and then you need a condenser. And you need some control systems in there, and there's 3 or 4 other things you need. The best story is some poor schmoo out in the middle of Indonesia bought one of these, and when it got there, you tried to figure out where you lit the match and made it run. You need a lifetime of experience to make all the other parts that go with it. So he's sitting out there with this thing thinking he bought a steam engine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of difference between a steam engine and a steam power plant. So that's all we need to know.
You call this the power plant itself? Or no,
the
steam engine is just this item, and the power plant is...
Steam engine is a thing that has pistons on one end and a power output shaft on the other. A power plant is something that has a fire and has a condenser and has an oiler and has a lot of things.
Yeah. And it's not modern because what are the parts missing to make this modern? What really is a modern steam engine?
You don't want to tempt me. A modern steam engine is one that that it has to do with the kind of valves that it has. And it needs basically a poppet valve, and it needs to have the different passages so that the hot steam is not being cooled when it comes in. You have to have only hot passage. You want to preserve the heat in the steam, and what happens is when steam expands, it cools down a lot. So in this engine, and many of them, which are simple to make, the cooled off exhaust steam, once it's expanded, is pushed out through in this case, through the same passage, through the same valve. So all this metal is cooled off before the hot steam comes in. And so there's your inefficiency is there. Your other inefficiency has to do with clearance volume, and this has high clearance volume. You want to have low clearance volume.
So that's the third quality of a modern engine, low clearance volume.
Low clearance volume, efficient preservation of the heat, and able to handle high pressure, high temperatures, because if you're not close to 700 or 800 degrees Fahrenheit, you're not going to get efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And also you get high pressure, then it's a much more compact unit. Otherwise you have a large unit.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the what you're trying to accomplish with a steam.
Does that mean that the design from those 4 points, uniflow, makes the passage, the preservation of heat, that's the only way you can achieve that quality, or are there other ways?
More people believe in uniflow than don't. But one of the smartest people, Art Gardner, with a PhD in mechanical engineering, does not believe in uniflow. He says if you have high enough superheat, you don't need uniflow. So he does counterflow with basically zero clearance volume.
Okay. So to review, so modern means you preserve the heat effectively, you have high temperatures, you have low clearance volume, and poppet valves. Is that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I'm desperately trying to find a book here. I might